This series is brought to you by you. Thank you so much for all of my patrons and the people who have used the Jackson's affiliate links. It is thanks to you guys that this series have been made possible. Thank you so much. Welcome back to Colossal Color Showdown. This is episode 3 of season 3, and we are going to start looking at Perylene Maroons. We have 12 beautiful Perylene Maroons, and I did have to take a little bit of a detour on the name thing because we have things like Maroon Perylene, which obviously is Perylene Maroon, Perylene Red, and Venice Purple. So in this particular episode, it's all going to be PR179, which is Perylene Maroon, just with slight different names. We have Daniel Smith, Holbein, Schmincke, Winsor Newton, M. Graham, Da Vinci, Mission Gold, Szmal, Rowney, which is a new brand, Isaro, which is a new brand. We only have it for this episode for this season, but I think it's really super interesting to bring that one in. First appearance of White Knight, and then we also have Winsor Newton Designer Gouache. Let's take a look at the Mastone, and first things to report are a couple of colors that were harder to re-wet than the other colors. One was Holbein and the other one was Rowney. They kind of felt a bit sticky. You know when you're trying to dissolve some paint and the dried paint feels quite sticky and hard to re-wet? It was that kind of thing. Another thing to report in terms of how it was to paint this was that the Schmincke's one, it went down so smooth, but it's kind of dried slightly streaky, whereas I have to say the Designer Gouache one is beautifully flat. So that's interesting because it didn't look smooth when I put it down, but it dries smooth, whereas Schmincke's one is the opposite. Let's look at the Mastone. There are some variations in the hue. I would say that the Roman Szmal's Perylene Maroon is the most red, like bright red color, whereas the Daniel Smith one is the most muted, and then Perylene Red by Isaro is granulating, whereas other colors aren't quite so clear in their granulation. This is like it's got bits in kind of color, whereas the other colors are a lot more homogeneous. In terms of streakiness, because this is a cheap paper, more colors are going to streak on this than on cotton paper. If you are using cheaper paper, I would go for colors like Roman Szmal one, the Winsor Newton Designer Gouache, because the Winsor Newton normal watercolor is a little bit more streaky than the gouache one. The most streaky of them all, I would say, is M. Graham, followed by Daniel Smith and White Knight. Da Vinci one is pretty smooth, Schmincke one's pretty smooth, Mission Gold is pretty smooth, Roman Szmal is pretty smooth, and obviously Winsor Newton Gouache one is very good. Let's look at the prices and some other information. First thing I want to note though is that I'm recording this on the 12th of May 2022, and you know that there are very, very awful, sad things happening in Ukraine. And White Knight is a Russian brand, and I noticed yesterday, so that is the 11th of May, that Jackson has a note on their White Knights page saying that they are no longer buying in new stock of White Knight because of the situation, and they've also donated to Red Cross, which I think is awesome. But if you do like White Knights and you do rely on Jackson's to supply you those paints, then you might need to stock up, or you might consider not supporting this brand, at least for now. I planned and bought all these paints way before all that happened. So we do have 2 White Knight colors in Perylene Green and in another episode later on in the series. I'm not going to remove them, but it's something to bear in mind when you're looking at White Knights, and in particular if you want to stock up on them in Jackson's. It's basically what they have in stock is all that they will have for the foreseeable future. On to prices. We have the most expensive in the UK is the Da Vinci one again. This is going to be a pattern because Da Vinci is imported, as I said in the last episode, and it's not imported by Jackson, it's imported by a smaller company, so they don't have as much price reducing power as Jackson's have. The cheapest one in the UK is the Winsor Newton Designer Gouache, at 41 pence per milliliter. And again, there is a significant price difference between the watercolor one and the gouache one. And this one, the watercolor one is £1.03 per milliliter, or £14.40 for 14 milliliter tube, whereas the gouache one is £5.80. So it's so much more affordable. So if you don't mind the differences and you want to save yourself a good chunk of money, then this is definitely a good option. However, I do have to note that the designer gouache did crack on my palette as it dried. The Perylene green one didn't do this. It stayed really well, but this one did. So that is something to look out for. It might not be a practical setup in your situation, or it might be, I don't know. So just look out for that one. Another thing to report is that White Knight's tube had a massive air pocket in the tube. I've never seen an air pocket that big before, which I was kind of quite upset about. I don't know about you, but I find it when I buy a tube that's sold by volume and there's a huge air pocket in, I get quite annoyed. So that is something to look out for as well. In terms of opacity, we have the opacity test here. I think the most interesting comparison is to compare the Winsor Newton one with its gouache equivalent. And the gouache one is obviously more opaque. You see it show up more on here than the watercolor one. So that's something to bear in mind between the two. But I have to say, Perylene Maroon Small is just as opaque as the gouache one. So it's not like the gouache one is extremely opaque and it's completely unusable with watercolor. Well, you can use gouache with watercolor, no problem anyway, but it's not a massive amount of opacity compared to other colors. You do get very transparent ones as well, though. The Daniel Smith one, the Mission Gold one, Holbein one, they're very transparent. And then somewhere in the middle is the Isaro one, Schmincke one, and the Vinci one. So there is a huge variety in opacity with Perylene Maroon. So that might be something you want to use to choose which brand you want to go for. Do you want to go for the transparent one or the more opaque one? And then finally for this particular episode is the gradation. And I mean, these colors are beautiful, but as you can see, and I do use way more excess water than you should on doing gradations to show you whether a color is going to cauliflower or not, or whether it's going to give you control or not. So if it doesn't cauliflower in this test, it's probably not going to cauliflower on normal use. So if you do struggle with cauliflowering, I would recommend Daniel Smith, Mission Gold, and a little bit of M. Graham, but definitely these two, because if it doesn't cauliflower with my test, you're going to be fine with whatever situation. I would say that Daniel Smith one actually do give you the 4 stages. So if how it gradates is the main thing that you want to buy paint on, then I highly recommend the Daniel Smith one. It doesn't cauliflower, it gives you really good control. I would say that the Rowney Small one and maybe the Da Vinci one gives you the least amount of control. And then M. Graham one has a huge value drop. This is partly to do with the fact that it has honey and it will re-wet really easily, which means you kind of end up with a thicker mixture in the mass stone and that struggles to pull down itself. So if you are using M. Graham and you end up with a little bit too thicker mixture, then just give it a little helping hand by pulling the paint down a little bit further. In terms of the 2 Winsor Newton ones, this is definitely the redder color. Me personally, I like this color better than this color, but in terms of the gradation, they're about the same. They're both going to cauliflower if you put too much water. They both have the ridging effect and they both have pretty little control. So that's definitely something to consider. You can really see the granulation happening in the Isaro one. There's dark particles in the mass stone and the second stage here, which is quite unique. There's kind of like a very, very fine granulation-ish kind of texture happening in the M. Graham and also in the Perylene Maroon, but it's nothing like the Isaro one. So if you want a Perylene Maroon that granulates, which as you can see is pretty unique feature, then go for the Isaro one. But to me, the Isaro one, the hue is slightly off. It's not as bright, deep red as the other Perylene reds that we have on this test sheet. If watching this video has made you curious about trying these colors, then I have the perfect dot card for you. This month's Patron dot card is a companion dot card to this episode and the next episode. It's the Perylene Maroons, and you get Perylene Maroons from Daniel Smith, Holbein, Schmincke, Winsor Newton, Mission Gold, De La Rowney, White Knight, and the Winsor Newton Gouache. It's a great economical way to get to try these colors out thoroughly without having to commit to buying whole tubes, so that you can just pick your favorite one and just buy one tube instead. If you'd like to receive this dot card, then all you have to do is head on over to patreon.com/autokano and sign up to the appropriate tiers, and this dot card will be on its way to you very shortly. So that's it for this episode. In the next episode, as always, we're going to have the lift and glaze, the salt test, how it looks on the cotton paper, and also how it mixes with other colors and tinting strengths. So do look forward to that. Do let me know in the comments down below what you think of these colors, which one's your favorite, which one you want to try, which ones you are currently using. I would love to know what you guys think of these colors. Thank you so much for watching this episode, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye!